we tell if anybody's here?
Stream is live. It popped up, so we can talk.
All right. Well, welcome to Ore-atory. This is our first event, so we appreciate your patience with us as we sort of experiment here. The goal moving forward is for Ore-atory is to have fast-paced discussions with some of mining's brightest minds, from engineers to environmentalists, geologists to executives, to inspire action and empowerment and share a positive industry narrative and foster a deeper appreciation for our industry. So as we kick off today, I thought it would be fitting to talk to the MRC team. And today we'll be discussing the unique world of mining recruitment. So without further ado, I'm Lindsey Schultz. I will be your host today. I'm CEO of MRC Recruiting. We have my dad, Robert Schultz, founder of MRC. Give him a wave, Dad.
Greetings.
Samantha Larson, who is our talent acquisition director. Heather Simoens, who is our senior HR consultant and talent acquisition manager. And Patty Embry, who is our talent acquisition manager. So diving right in. For segment one, let's talk about something strange that you guys have experienced as a recruiter, and how did you deal with it? Sam?
Do you want to start or not? Oh, Sam, go ahead.
Yeah. So just recently we navigated through something that we've never had to deal with, but is starting to come up more and more, and that's the use of marijuana and medical marijuana. So I had a candidate that was very transparent with me that they had a medical marijuana card, and that they partaked in marijuana, and that their current company was fine with them doing that. It was in a state where it was legal, also the legal medical card. And we had to kind of navigate that through with the other company that this candidate was applying to. And we know that a lot of bigger companies, even if it's legal in the state, don't allow marijuana use for any reason. So that was kind of a thing that we had to navigate through. That was something we had never come across before.
Yeah, it's certainly one of those things, and we're all figuring it out as we go along. Dad, I know you've got some good stories.
How long do I have?
Less than 6 minutes.
I can do it less than 6 minutes. Well, since we're talking about recruiting and relationship between candidates and clients, which will, I guess, be our overall topic, germane to that discussion, and perhaps an extreme example of a lack of communication story. Despite the critical nature of this particular search that I'm going to tell you about, almost everything that could go wrong did go wrong. I was conducting the CEO search for a board of directors for a sizable Latin American project. 500,000 base salary plus perks, and engaging with the lead director. I submitted 2 candidates right away for benchmarking to calibrate the search. And then the lead director got back to me and said, no, he wasn't interested, and then gave me a list of all the things he said he didn't want. That list was about as comprehensive as requirements. He basically said he didn't want a former president, CEO, a director, project director, board director, a consultant, and no one over the age 60. Now, this is a European-based company, so they can do this age thing. We can't here. So I told the 2 candidates, both over 60, that I had to disqualify them for the role. 2 or 3 months passed with no feedback from the board. I submitted somewhere between 10 to 15 additional candidates. All of a sudden, I get a phone call out of Vancouver from an HR manager not involved in this search, asking whether I had submitted a particular candidate. Yes, I had. Apparently, he was being interviewed in Tokyo. Much longer story short, they ended up hiring that individual. The candidate was not in touch with me. The board of directors was not in touch with me. And they hired someone that had basically all the experience they said they didn't want. He had been a president, CEO, director, project director, board, consultant, all of those things, and was 68 years old. The happy story is that my next phone call came from a compensation person on the board asking me to go ahead and invoice my fee, which was considerable. However, the candidate was pissed at me because he thought I had inappropriately disqualified him. The company was happy with my performance, but literally 3+ months had gone by with no communication. That's an illustration of perhaps what can seriously go wrong with a recruitment initiative and the lack of adequate engagement and feedback with the client. So there's a quick recruiter story.
Well, anything that can go wrong will go wrong. There's a saying about that, right? But I think that we see all kinds of really interesting things on a daily basis. And often, as we talked about the sort of evolving world of marijuana usage, a quick statistic that we have is that 24 states and the District of Columbia have legalized small amounts of marijuana for both medical and recreational use. 14 states have legalized the drug for medical use only, and the remaining 12 allow CBD products that contain little to no THC. So just to sort of engage our audience a little bit, does your company have a policy on employee medical marijuana usage? What does that look like? And while I'm hoping some of you respond to us in the comments, Heather probably can weigh in on this a little bit from her background in HR. So I'm putting you on the spot.
That's okay. The mine that I worked at, we had a zero tolerance. Well, it was interesting because it switched hands several times. But so when I first started there, they were allowing people to have use the medical marijuana card. But then I quickly said, well, when I talked with all of the people I said, we need to actually not do that. It's not good for us to do that as a company. So especially since we're federally mandated, even though, Colorado is a state that allows medical and there's dispensaries everywhere. But so, yeah, the mine that I worked at, we definitely had a policy of zero tolerance for that.
Yeah. And I think we see, companies having some different policies from being suppliers to having people on site and other things like that.
Yeah.
So we have a comment. Sherry Powell says from a former employer under MSHA federally regulated, there was zero tolerance. So, I think we're seeing that be the case through most of these scenarios. And I think we'll continue to see that evolve as testing becomes better and things change as we move forward. But that being said, I'm going to push us right into segment 2, which really goes into some resume trends and LinkedIn pet peeves, which is sort of one of my favorite areas to talk about recently. So let's talk first about what are some LinkedIn profile to-dos or not to-dos. And Patty, what is your favorite thing to see on LinkedIn or not to see on LinkedIn?
Certifications, any classes you've taken, I think those are really important. Just shows that you are continuing to grow as a person in your career as well. I recently took the intro to ESG in mining, which is really interesting, and finally got those certificates done. So I think that's very important to show that you're continuing to grow.
I agree. And I guess I should say this more broadly covers more than just LinkedIn, it's resumes as well. So any other examples? Heather, maybe? Oh, Sam.
Yeah, my LinkedIn kind of pet peeve and maybe like to do is you always have to have a profile picture. I hate when people don't have profile pictures. And then also it's a professional site. So like the profile picture of you like at a barbecue with the beer in your hand, that's not the greatest. And then also I am loving the new I really like when people utilize the headline and how you can make it more than just I'm a chemical engineer for so and so. Like when it has a bunch of things that are about you and who you are, it makes it easier for me to see and interact and find ways that we have things in common. And I really have enjoyed watching people utilize the headlines on LinkedIn.
I love the headlines. It's one of the first things that we get to see with our license on LinkedIn. And the more creative, the better. I tell people, like, sort of use this as your superpower to talk to people. It doesn't just have to be your job title and your company. It could be anything that you're passionate about or other areas. And I think a lot of people have been deterred from showing their personality. And I disagree. I think it's really important and it's a differentiator. Heather, what do you think? LinkedIn, resume, pet peeves?
Sam and I have the same opinion about the photo and it being a professional site. But I think it's important too that your resume needs to match your LinkedIn profile, like what you're in relation to your jobs, because I've seen it where I'm like, well, this isn't on your resume, but it's on your LinkedIn profile. Or I've had it where it says on their LinkedIn profile they live here, but on their resume it says they live here. And it really needs to match. It's important that professionally, especially if we're going to submit resumes along with your LinkedIn link, I think that's important.
And I think we're seeing that happen a lot more often. I often have clients that instantly go to the LinkedIn profile and then look at a resume. And so I think having those be similar, where perhaps there's a little different spin, but ultimately the trajectory looks the same. The timeline for sure is the same. Your certifications, degrees, all of that should mirror one another. Dad, what about you?
One thing that I think is critical for me, and I think helpful to managers or recruiters in-house to a company. As a search consultant, we really want to know all we can about a candidate. And so representing your complete work history with timelines on your resume, especially if you have 30 to 40 years or so experience. You can summarize that earlier work experience, but I think it's important to be transparent about the time you've been in the industry. This saves me some interviewing time, gives me an immediate, transparent perspective on your overall background, and also gives anyone in-house to a company an appropriate perspective on what you can, the timeline and experience you've had over X number of years that you can bring to an organization.
Yeah, and I think something worth mentioning in this area is that recruiters should be your partner, right? And so if you're a candidate looking for a role, it's our job as a recruiter to establish trust. And we get to have lots of awkward conversations, whether it's you don't want to live in this certain area, or you have a bad manager that you're looking to flee from, or you have a medical marijuana card, or however we sort of want to have these conversations. The more transparent you can be with a recruiter that you trust and can build a relationship, that allows us to find better fits for you. And so I think from resumes to LinkedIn, it shouldn't go without saying that establishing a relationship built on trust is really, really key. And so we certainly work hard to do that here, but we also expect a level of transparency from both our candidates and clients as well. So that being said, an interesting question that I would like to pose to all of you that might be listening to us today: how often are you updating or reviewing your LinkedIn profile or resume? And so give us in the comments what you do as a general practice. I'm curious. I think I've got some ideas on that, and I'm sure that the rest of the group does. So we'll sort of talk about that for a few seconds while hopefully you respond. But team, what from your perspective would be a good time to review your LinkedIn or resume on a routine basis?
Well, I think we should always be kind of updating our LinkedIn and tweaking it. And I always tell candidates that our LinkedIn should have everything we've ever done, because it doesn't matter how many pages it is. So like the more thorough you are on your LinkedIn, the better. And then I think you should be tweaking your resume for every job you're applying to. So your resume should cater to the job, but your LinkedIn should have like literally anything that you've ever done in your life. And then you should be tweaking that all the time of like different things you're interested in. If you're applying for jobs, you should obviously have it very up to date. But I think if you're not looking, you still should be updating your LinkedIn profile probably every 6 months at least.
Yeah, I agree. And I would go as far as say, look at it quarterly and maintain sort of a list of all of your, I tell candidates, just keep a list of your awesomeness. What have you done? What projects have you contributed to? What are your wins? Because we let that go into the day-to-day so often that we forget. And then, as a recruiter, and I think many of you do this on a daily basis, where you have these great conversations and candidates leave ideally feeling really empowered and inspired because you've all of a sudden gotten them to remember that they contributed to a project or that they had a skill that they hadn't talked about in a long time. But if you're doing this on your own, you don't have us to kind of coax that out of you. Just if you feel like you had a win that day, write it down. It's sort of like a nice little pep talk that you get to give yourself, and you can add to your LinkedIn and your resume as you move along. So we have a comment of once or twice a year if you've got something to add to your resume. And I think that's totally perfect. And so, in the vein of keeping us moving forward in these short segments, I'm going to move us to segment 3, which is candidate experience. So let's first talk about what candidate experience is. Let's define it a little bit for anybody who might not be familiar with the term. And then let's talk about what it looks like when it's done right from the company side. And so from my perspective, candidate experience is from the moment a candidate goes to either a recruiter website or a company website. And what does that feel like for them? Is there a clear vision statement? Why would they be joining? What does the company do? Is it easy to apply? Do they get followed up with? Is all of that a positive scenario for them? And ideally, as organizations continue to evolve and be more mindful of this, they've got a really positive perception from candidates moving forward. That has not always been the case, as we might talk about here shortly. So that, from my perspective, is candidate experience. Does anybody else have something to add to that?
Well, I'll go ahead. In terms of our organization, it's been very important to us as a team of recruiters or search consultants. My background was industrial social work. So relationships and building relationships openly and transparently was very, very critical to me in that profession. I kid mining guys now that we're all social workers here. We're just, hopefully social workers for the upwardly mobile rather than the questionably mobile that I once had to deal with. So a relationship-based engagement is absolutely critical to us. Valuing the candidate's skills and competencies is clearly a part of what we try to understand, and being respectful and communicating openly and doing so in a timely way with our candidates is critical to us. And really what I'm describing is just as critical from an organizational standpoint. If a company engages with a candidate in that fashion, bringing someone on as a member of their team and takes the time to articulate that makes all the difference in the world in terms of a candidate's experience.
I agree. And I guess to kind of dive into perhaps an example that is not a shining light, that gives us a lot of perhaps talking points as we move forward. I was made aware of a scenario where an individual that I know went through a series of interviews, 5 or 6, over the course of 6 or so weeks, and was really excited about an opportunity, and then was abruptly rejected while they were perhaps expecting an offer to come through, abruptly rejected by email on a weekend, which is a really, really deflating scenario, and not a positive candidate experience at all. And so let's talk about this. What would be a good practice? How can companies be doing this better? Because we consistently hear on both sides that there's not enough talent out there, or that they're not getting back to them. So we have frustration on candidate and client sides. How do we sort of remedy this? What can companies be doing better so that they can treat candidates, as my dad said, with respect, or have practices that are more forward looking, so that they have these people to look at later on, even if they're not a fit today?
Well, I think if they're utilizing a recruiting firm like us, we typically will be the ones to let the candidate know that they are being rejected. So, I mean, that responsibility typically lays right upon us. But from my perspective, and being an HR person, I always try to follow up with everybody and do it in person and be honest, because and maybe sometimes you can't always be honest, but you at least try to be as honest as you can be. And when you can tell people in person, it just makes it so much easier, because email isn't always the best way.
I think it's very rarely the best way, right? Especially after that length of time.
Well, and especially if it was automated. I think you had mentioned that it was automated. It wasn't even, had no personal touch to it either.
Right, right. And I think another area that I think of is, having the ability to say, this is what the process should look like. And even if you deviate from that process that you're forecasting at an early stage, there is an expectation on both sides. Okay, I'm going to have perhaps 3 interviews or talk to all of these people. And as a candidate, they can be ready for that and prepared. And if, they don't get to the second or third interview, they can follow back up and also provide a positive experience and say, hey, thanks for the opportunity. The client can say, these are, perhaps some of the reasons you didn't move forward. I think feedback is a courtesy, and it allows people to have some information as to what they did right or wrong or not, if they're just not the right fit. So it's an empowering situation. And I think most individuals who want to grow in their career really do appreciate feedback, even if it's hard sometimes.
And adding to that, I think, like what you were saying, I think a lot of times these companies have to hire someone, and they're so desperate to get someone that they don't think through what their process is going to look like. So then, they're in their second interview with a candidate, and they're like, oh, we forgot that so-and-so should probably interview them, and so-and-so. And I think the benefit of using a recruiter is we can walk you through that process and help you get a process. So, okay, there's going to be 3 interviews. This is who will be in the first. This is who would be in the second. This is who in the third. So that way you don't have to think about that. And you're not 4 interviews in and oh, so-and-so hasn't spoken to this person yet. Because I think one thing that a lot of companies forget is that gone are the days when the candidate is at their mercy. A lot of candidates have lots of job offers. And if you're providing a bad experience, they're going to assume that that's how the company runs. So you want your interview process to go as smoothly as possible. And because that's how they're going to see your company and how they're going to be when they're there.
We use it all the time. I mean, it's sort of like dating, right? You got to get the warm and fuzzies. The chemistry has to be on, everything has to be just right, because perhaps it doesn't get any better, and everybody's true colors come out and stress happens. And so having your act together through an interview process on both sides, candidate and client, and then having a well orchestrated process to have strong candidate experience is really important. I just got a comment in here that said, do you think that mining companies and recruiters could come together and strategize ways to reintegrate the face of talent pipeline lack of people choosing the profession at school and university? Yes. What do you guys think about that question? I'll let you go.
Well, I think, there's a stress in two ways in the mining industry right now. There's a stress on the supply side of talent, which this individual is obviously acknowledging. Um, and there's also a stress on the financing coming into the industry. However, it's not quite a perfect storm. Companies are struggling to find talent, and obviously our organization, among others, are a vehicle to provide that talent. Without question, and I know, Lindsey, you've taken an array of initiatives through our organization to engage with companies and working to establish a relationship with those organizations where we can help those companies identify and engage more fully with an array of individuals out there, that some of which have not yet decided on a career, and others that are early in their careers in mining through various mining schools. So you might be the best one to elaborate on that.
So I think that there are a lot of really interesting ways to do this. I think that it tends to fall to a lower priority, right? I think that there are so many companies out there that are focused on production, for instance. If you're a mining company, you're focused on producing. If you're an exploration company, you're sort of focused on surviving and finding money at this point. If you're a startup and perhaps entering the mining industry, you need the silver bullet person to make that company work and really dive in. And so we see it from an array of perspectives, but often the idea of talent and where is it going to come from doesn't happen until they realize it's hard to come by. And so that's when they call us, and we aren't always the silver bullet. We do know a lot of individuals, and we are constantly working to sort of make those relationships happen. But I think that if mining companies and recruiters partnered more actively, that the reach would go far beyond. But having a compelling employee value proposition to start would give perhaps candidates, as I call them, anybody that's looking to join the industry, a reason to. Saying we produce copper isn't compelling enough for somebody that doesn't know anything about mining to join a copper company. Why are they doing it? How does it contribute? What is the value of our greater society for producing this? So I think that we need to talk about it in ways that really do reach the end user. And there are some companies that are having some really great impact with this concept, but I think sort of a little think tank with some companies that were willing to be creative and extend themselves in this area with recruiters or universities per se would have far better impact. And I think University of Arizona and Colorado School of Mines with their practical application and underground mines where people can go and touch it and see it before they ever have to sign up to do a degree is a hugely impactful component that we can't overlook. And so field trips, talking about it, mineral kits, all these things I think make a big difference in terms of reaching an audience that might not know about mining. But I think that there's a lot more to do too. So we've got another. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that there's a real lack of early intervention. And I think that mining companies and smaller mining companies and recruiters could work together to bring in more internships for students that haven't made up their mind of what industry they want to go into, because there's a lot of things you can do with civil engineering and mechanical and electrical and chemical. And like I know from working for a bigger company, when we would go to company or schools that had all those industries present, a lot of students that interned for us didn't even know mining was an option, had never even thought of it. And I think it's not always convenient to have an intern at your company, but you're setting those students up to fall in love with mining and the industry and the people in it, because we all know that mining's a wonderful industry to be in, and they're doing really innovative and interesting things for the environment, for the world, for everything that we need in our lives. And there's not enough exposure to that. And I think starting young, but maybe before college or within the college level, to have that exposure and offer internships is a key component here.
Yeah, I agree. And so Samantha, sort of bringing that into what Hayden's saying here, sort of the lack of talent and lack of income and revenue stream go hand in hand, and this poor image and social license that's hurting the market cap, and offering choices for individuals looking to join, as well as our public perception. And I think there's a lot to be done about that. And stemming from what Samantha said, giving people this exposure early on and having a narrative that's positive, that's impactful, and creating that social license, not just with highly, highly technical people, but individuals that are impacting mining, from social license to permitting to, it could be attorneys or HR or finance individuals. They don't even know it's an option. Every time I talk to them, it's an accident that they got into mining, right? It was sort of like a serendipitous situation. They joined a company, all of a sudden they fell in love with the industry. So the power of storytelling is pretty amazing. And we have great storytellers and great stories to tell. And being able to rewrite that narrative in a positive fashion that allows outsiders to the mining industry to see it, I think there's some leverage that we should be using there. But in the idea of time and keeping this snappy, I just sort of want to keep us moving forward. And so I want to put out there how to follow us at MRC. And so you can go to our website, which is mrcrecruiting.com. You'll find our LinkedIn, Instagram, and other social channels there. MRC Recruiting specializes in connecting connecting top talent with leading companies in the mining industry. And we focus on strategic talent placement, which champions diversity, inclusion, and providing a reliable and strategic partnership to both clients and candidates. So our goal is to offer comprehensive support for job seekers, from resume services to career consultations to perhaps mentoring or coaching. And so ultimately our goal is to ensure candidates find roles, whether it's through us or other means, where they can thrive. For companies, our goal is to be an expert in finding the right candidates that align not just with the technical requirements, but with the company culture, so that we can build long-lasting and successful relationships with both clients and candidates. And that brings us to our last segment for the day. So this is rapid fire, guys. No explanation, no anything else. Give me off the top of your head, what is one retention strategy that every company, mining supply company should be using?
A good work-life balance.
Love it. Who's next?
Market pay. They want to pay them fairly for their jobs.
Flexible PTO and more of it, and maybe flexibility with where they can work from. I know that's sometimes hard with mining, but there are some jobs that can be done from home or part-time from home that I think that the mining industry is not utilizing.
Perfect. Dan.
Well, acknowledge the real value of a candidate's skill set and competencies as they provide that to an organization, and provide them with challenges and a pathway for future opportunity is absolutely critical.
Yeah. The last one I'm gonna say is a culture of psychological safety. And for many, that means that they can go to work and talk to their boss and say, hey, I want more of a challenge. And you have that succession plan or pathway forward, because it's welcome to say, hey, give me more work, or hey, I've got a life circumstance that I need to be working from home, or I would really like to make a little bit more money, or hey, this is what's going on in my world. I'm both professional and a person, and have real life stuff going on. And so having a culture that promotes psychological safety internally, I think, cuts to the quick of a lot of the areas that we're talking about today. And so that is where I'll leave that. So to conclude, I really appreciate all of you guys being here. I know that we talk about this together all of the time, but sharing it with a broader audience is really fun. And we look forward to doing it again. We will plan on doing a oratory on a monthly basis with others who have interest in joining us to talk about whatever they might be passionate about and how they're making a positive impact in the mining industry, so we can tell the story more broadly. So please follow up with us on LinkedIn, or put some more comments in there, engage with our team. This will be uploaded to YouTube and we will share it with you. If there are other questions, we'll hang out here and have some further conversation if you guys are up for it. Otherwise, we'll look forward to staying connected. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a quick comment. I remember since I'm the old dude here, I remember when I was young and I saw commercials saying, join the Navy and see the world. I've worked 50 years in search work, and early on I worked other industries. I've never seen an industry that allowed individuals to see so much of the world as the mining industry. So if your interest is getting around the globe, this is an industry that certainly allows for that.
I agree. Well, awesome. Well, thank you all for being here and sharing your time with us. Happy Thursday, and we'll see you soon.
Cheers.